What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time we're taking a look at The Shadow starring Alec Baldwin. Now, I'm going to try and make this review as short as I possibly can because I have a lot of good memories watching The Shadow. I remember being 4 years old when this movie came out, and me and my grandmother used to watch this movie religiously. She would always tell me the stories of how The Shadow was this radio play that would be on the radio when she was a kid, and how The Shadow was mysterious and creepy and stuff like that. Now, the movie doesn't really go into the how can I put it lightly, the horror elements of what the shadow character could be, but as a gritty detective like story, I think this is a damn good underrated movie that almost 30 years later it doesn't get the recognition that I think it deserves. I think that this movie is extremely, like I said, extremely underrated. It's got a good, solid, tightly written story for the most part, and it's got a really solid cast. And Alec Baldwin in the lead as Lamont Cranston, the Shadow, really does command a presence. I like how he basically plays three different characters that are all the same person. Like when this movie first opens, we see the Lamont Cranston as this character called Ling Ko. Now, when Cranston was a part of the First Great War, but he then defected to become a warlord in opium manufacturer while during the Great War. He pretty much defected from the United States Army to be a warlord. And we see the evil side of Lamont Cranston as Ling Ko and just how ruthless he is. And then transition 7 years later after he meets the Toku, and the Toku trains him to cloud men's minds and to pretty much help help Ling Ko become Lamont Cranston again by getting his redemption. We transport 7 years later. Now he's the Shadow, and he's back to being Lamont Cranston again. And he plays all three of these different personalities of the same character very distinctly. And I don't think Alec Baldwin gets enough credit for being a very versatile actor because each of these different personalities have their own unique characteristic. Ling Ko is evil. Lamont Cranston, for lack of a better phrase, is pretty much like a Bruce Wayne, and the Shadow is his Batman counterpart. And I think that Alec Baldwin really shuffles these three different personalities really, really well, and I really think he does not get enough credit at all. Penelope Ann Miller plays the love interest Margo Lane, and I think Penelope Ann Miller does a really good job playing Margo Lane. She has a telepath, so mentally that her and so mentally from a mental speaking, her and Cranston have a connection sort of way because she can read the thoughts of Lamont Cranston and vice versa to him. So instantaneously they have a good connection, and I think for the most part their romance is very solidly developed, and I think Miller and Baldwin have a decent chemistry with one another. Uh, the villain in this movie is played by John Lone, and the villain is called Shirwan Khan, the last descendant of Genghis Khan, and Khan Khan is to me fantastic. John Lone as Shirwan Khan plays this role perfectly. He's great. He's just the right amount of over the top, yet still keeping it very, very grounded. And I also like the character dynamics between Lamont Cranston and Khan because now some of the best scenes in this movie are when Cranston and Khan are just like sharing scenes with one another, and the chemistry with John Lone and Alec Baldwin is really, really understated. They got really good chemistry with one another, and their bantering is just so interesting and so hypnotic. You can't keep your eyes off it, and you really see that these two men are pretty much like the two sides of the same coin because Shirwan Khan pretty much tells Cranston that he idolized him as Linko, that he's like his inspiration. Pretty much, Shirwan Khan Linko is what Shirwan Khan could have been, and Shirwan Khan takes that and wants to amplify it. In a sense, Cranston pretty much created his own villain with Khan because Khan idolized Linko and wants to be like Linko, and that creates the two sides of the same coin because Khan basically wants to be the dark side, wants to bring the dark side, wants to be the dark personality of Cranston, while Cranston wants to remain as the Shadow, while Cranston is trying to fight his own darkness within inside himself, which is why he is the Shadow, trying to fight his own redemption. But yet that evil that he was as Linko is still lurking inside him. It's really, really subtle in how it's played out. It's not really, it's really subtle how it's played out, but it's just so damn good from a storyline perspective, and it really makes the dynamic between the Shadow and Shirwan Khan really, really fascinating, really, really interesting to me. And the whole storyline for this movie is very simple, but very, very intriguing as well. Like I said, Shirwan Khan's the last descendant of Genghis Khan, so his whole plot is that he wants to finish what Genghis Khan started, and that is take over the world. Only he wants to do it with with an atomic nuclear bomb, pretty much using modern warfare to finish off his ancestors' work. So the fact that it's Shirwan Khan's birthright to do this makes me an even more fascinating character. And I just think that the strongest parts of this movie is Khan and Cranston in their dynamics with one another. Some other things in this movie, they're kind of underutilized. Like this movie has Sir Ian McKellen and Tim Curry who are in this movie, with McKellen being Margo Lane's father and Tim Curry pretty much being the henchman of Shirwan Khan. Now, McKellen and Curry, for the material that they're given and the screen time they got, they make the most of it, but they're really underutilized. And it's a damn shame because McKellen and Curry are fantastic, especially Tim Curry. And to me, Tim Curry's got some underrated comedic bits in this movie, and I like the whole storyline of of Farley Claymore, Tim Curry's character. He's pretty much afraid of the shadow. And when you get to the climax where they're in this empty room and you see Claymore go completely nuts and crazy and just completely petrified, it's great acting by Tim Curry. He's some of his most underrated comedic bits are in this movie. But yeah, this movie could at least use more of Claymore and maybe a little more proper utilization of Tim Curry. Other than that, he's more or less reduced to a background type of character who only gets screen time because of his association with the villain, and I think that's a letdown because you could have done more, and you could have done more with Ian McKellen too, which the movie didn't, but it's okay. Peter Boyle's in this movie, who plays pretty much Cranston's cab driver, and he has some good moments here and there. It's fun to see him. I think this movie is really well made. Russell McCulley, the director, did a really good job at capturing that late 30s, early 40s aesthetic through a nostalgic lens, and I like how this is a heightened New York, yet grounded in the late 30s and late 40s. And I just like the tone of this movie. This movie is not like a dark movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it has a sense of grittiness, but also has a sense of fun and intrigue as well. And it does have a good balance at never losing its tone. And for its time, the special effects in this movie, they are pretty good. Now, some hold up better than most. Particularly the mirror scene at the end, which is a great scene, and it's actually really, really cool, and I like it a lot. Now, this movie does not utilize the shadow a lot, which is actually a good thing because it keeps the shadow persona very, very mysterious, and it only utilizes the shadow when it absolutely needs to. Like, we see the shadow when Lamont Cranston first goes to New York, and then we don't see the shadow later until the shadow tries to save Margo Lane's father, Shirwan Khan. And I like how they were very, very meticulous in knowing when and when not to show the shadow on screen, kind of keeping him the persona a mystery, and making you wanting to wait until we see the shadow. And the overall effect of the shadow, of seeing the shadow's shadow, for lack of a better phrase, is actually really well done, and it looks solid, and it looks pretty damn good for 1994 standards. So yeah, as you can obviously say, I really love the movie The Shadow. I think this movie is an underrated gem. Yes, it does have some issues here and there. Some characters aren't utilized to their full potential, but overall, this is a solid movie. Good directing, a very good performance by Alec Baldwin, and it's a shame this movie did not spawn a franchise because this movie could have done. There's so much more you could have done with this material, and it's a shame that it didn't go further than this, because a series of Shadow movies could have been very interesting, especially deep diving more into the Shadow lore. It could have made for some good stuff. So anyway, my overall thoughts: solid 8 out of 10 for The Shadow. I highly recommend it if you have not seen it in a long time. Give it a watch. It's damn good. So yeah, those are my thoughts on The Shadow. 8 out of 10. Well, let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I will check you back next time for more.